Alright guys, today we're going to talk about a lens. We're going to talk about the 70-300 4.5 to 6.3 G ED VR lens, and specifically we're going to talk about the DX version of the Nikon 70-300. We'll be talking about this AFP lens today, okay? Not to be confused with older AFS lenses, and not to be confused with the FX version of this lens, which is much more expensive. Now, I will say right off the bat that the FX version is known to be optically superior. But this DX VR lens offers amazing value for money. In fact, you can pick up this lens for, I believe, just 200 bucks if you buy the refurbished version of the lens, and there's nothing wrong with the refurbished versions. Basically, this lens often gets packaged with the entry-level DSLR kits, and if those get returned, Nikon has to check them over and then resell them as refurbished lenses. Okay, so let's start with what's good. Well, this is a telephoto lens, guys. 70-300 is quite the range. Now on a DX camera, that becomes the equivalent of 105 to 450 millimeters. Keep in mind that when a lens is 70-300, the focal length will not change. I mean, the focal length is here to stay. It's just that on a DX camera sensor, it's like cropping in and getting the 105 millimeter field of view to 450 millimeter field of view. One of the great things about this lens is how compact it is. I mean, it's the size of a tall beer can. Okay, it's very comfortable in the hand. It's very, very lightweight. I mean, guys, for a telephoto lens, this thing is 415 grams. That's just under a pound. Zooms out, okay, adds about 2/3 more length to the size of the lens. Very smooth zoom mechanism here. Just a quarter turn takes you from 70 to 300 millimeters, so that's pretty nifty. Now that's not going to be great for video. I know video people prefer a longer focus throw, but for quickly getting from 70 to 300, that very versatile focal range focuses very, very quickly. Now when I first got this lens, I hadn't actually used AFP lenses before, and if you don't know what the AFP lenses are, this is the new stepper motor technology that Nikon has been using. The Canon equivalent is STM. First, I thought the lens was broken because I didn't realize it was focusing that quickly. Uses a common small filter size. Has a 58 millimeter filter thread, so you don't have to go overboard spending money on expensive filters. But it's just so much fun, and it opens up so many creative possibilities for not much money. You know, if you don't have a telephoto lens, if you just have your standard kit lens, or maybe you have a nifty 50 and you've never used a zoom lens like this, I think you owe it to yourself to try it because it offers a lot of creative possibilities, and you get the compressed perspective and images that you would not get with your smartphone these days, right? Because everyone's used to those wider focal lengths now. And you can actually absolutely do portraits with this lens, guys. You would think that the 4.5 to 6.3 not wide enough for bokeh, but you'd be surprised at the kind of bokeh you can get at 300 millimeters with this guy, or any lens for that matter, even at f7.1 or f8. I think there's something psychological. People see that f6.3 and they think, okay, I'm just not going to get foreground background separation. I'm not going to get that cool, you know, depth of field effect that I want. But that's not true at all. Obviously, I would not be reviewing this lens if I was not pleasantly surprised with its optical quality. You can get very, very sharp results. There's minor distortion, minor chromatic aberration, but it's well controlled and can be fully corrected in Photoshop. But this lens is sharp. You know, you stop it down just half a stop or a full stop. So for example, at the 300 millimeter end, I'd like to shoot it at f7.1. It just sharpens considerably. Okay, you can shoot it wide open if you like, nothing wrong with that. It's plenty sharp in the center, wide open. But if you want to get some of the corners sharp, you just stop it down a stop and you're good to go. You don't need seriously expensive lens if you just need a telephoto for casual use. If you're not going to be taking pictures of birds in flight, if you're not going on a safari or to the Galapagos, this lens may be all you need. And you can use it just fine on an FX camera. Now, an obvious downside to this lens, guys, is how cheap it is. Plastic construction. This thing's not going to survive a fall. You know, I wouldn't expect it to survive the elements. I certainly wouldn't take it under rain or snow. It's not weather sealed. It's not dust or splash resistant. Again, it just gets the picture at the focal length you need, and that's pretty much it. Plastic design, everything is plasticky. I don't think there's any metal. Certainly the plastic is tough, but it is plastic, okay? So that's the price you pay. You know, Nikon certainly took out a lot of stuff to keep costs down. So the first thing you'll notice is this lens actually has a plastic lens mount. And so these things are very prone to breaking, okay, or cracking or snapping. Not that metal mounts are immune, but these things just are structurally not as strong. So you just have to be careful when you're putting the lens on the camera. You know, be careful, and then don't pick up the camera lens combination by the lens. You'll notice this is a VR lens, and there is actually no VR switch on this lens. There is no VR switch, there's no autofocus manual focus switch, there's no aperture ring. This is as stripped down as you can get, guys. This is Nikon saying, how cheap can we make a telephoto lens? Okay, we're going to use computer-aided design to get the optics nice, but we're going to cut costs everywhere else. We're going to make it in Thailand. Okay, nothing wrong with Thailand, but this is not one of these made in Japan Nikon legends that you may be used to if you're into wildlife photography. You have to manually enable autofocus, manual focus in your camera menu. For example, on my camera, the D750, because it's an FX camera, it's not fully compatible with these AFP DX lenses. I can't turn off the VR. So some people have reported shutter shock or VR not quite working correctly between the shutter speeds of 1/100 and 1/250. I personally haven't noticed too much of this myself, but I would love it if you guys could let me know in the comments if you've experienced something like that. But I find that when I'm shooting this lens, you know, I want to shoot it usually faster than 1/300 of a second anyway, because I'm probably capturing wildlife or something in motion, so it's not a big deal for me. But, you know, just something that I have to point out. No aperture ring, no focus distance scale. This lens may require a firmware upgrade if you use it with your camera. I'm going to link to the Nikon AFP compatibility chart because there's no point going over every camera lens combination. Basically, for some cameras, it will be fully compatible. For others, it will be semi-compatible, meaning, again, whether you can turn the VR on and off. And for some cameras, this lens just will not autofocus. So it really depends on what camera you have and what firmware version you're using. Okay, and guys, the elephant in the room is the vignetting. Okay, if you use this lens on a full frame camera, you're not going to cover the full frame image sensor. You're going to get some darkened areas around the edges of your image. Okay, and so I'm going to show you guys what that looks like at different focal lengths. What I tend to do is select the 1.2x image area when I'm using this lens on my D750 full frame camera. Okay, not the 1.5x. I figure it's fine. I'm okay with just a tiny bit of vignetting, but I want more resolution. So I shoot it at the 1.2x. In the 1.2x mode, the vignetting is reduced considerably, and you can crop out the rest. Okay guys, let's look at some sample images from this lens. So this lens is not going to compete with $5,000 or even $1,000 wildlife telephoto lens. If you want a proper telephoto lens, I think really the journey begins with the Nikon 200 to 500 millimeter E-series VR lens. But with this guy, you know, for the price you're paying, the optical quality just blows me away. Now with the lockdown, I haven't been able to travel too much, so I'll just show you what kind of wildlife you can capture with this lens. I mean, you'd be surprised at the kind of animals you can find walking around urban areas. I think with the pandemic, some of the animals have been reclaiming the cities. Here we have a sighting of a beaver in an urban park. Here's a picture of a mallard. At first I was calling it a duck, but I was corrected by someone. This is a mallard. And you know, as you can see, if you get close, if you get decently close to animals or wildlife, you can get very acceptable results. I mean, this would be a perfect lens to use at the zoo or in another controlled environment like that. Now, you're not going to get pictures of birds in flight in the wild with this lens. Okay, this is not a birding lens. I think for birding, the focal lengths really start at 400 millimeters, but really you'd want something like 500 or 600 millimeters. So right away, guys, this is not a birding lens. But for wildlife, for parks, certainly for your dog, this lens is absolutely plenty. highly recommend going with one of these guys. Take it around town, you know, buy it just so you have an excuse to go to the park. Best chance of seeing wildlife or birds is early in the day or when the sun is setting. I think that's when you have the greatest chance of catching them in their acts. And this lens will get you out of the house, and just for that reason alone, I think it's worth the price of admission. If you have used this lens, let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think, or maybe let us know what you ended up upgrading to. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.